if it's a site where they have some psychologists, like at VA, it'll be a few psychologists that work with families. If I interviewed with that psychologist, I would mention that I do family work. So it's just kind of being strategic about it in a way, and thinking how much you really want to emphasize it. And then if you don't like family work, it goes on your CV and you don't mention it. I mean, if you're not wanting to get yourself into a situation where you have to do a bunch of family work, then don't emphasize it a lot.
So you'd say it'd be okay to just, talk about your external prac experience that's relevant to that site, in addition to the prac.
Sure. Yeah, because that's another unique situation of this program is that we do most of our practicums on site. So, but for other people, when they say prac, they mean what we call an externship. And so it's important to not devalue what you've done here. For us it feels like courses and it feels like the cave again. That's a huge chunk of your experience, and it's really important to realize that that is as valuable as their externship practicums. And I think sometimes more valuable because you're getting the live supervision and the taped feedback and having people behind the glass right after your session. And so that's don't let yourself think, well, I haven't worked in all these settings. That's okay. You've had that experience and you've had it here and it's been good. So be sure of that. Yeah. I'm trying to think what else. If you have like an awards and honors section, a lot of the times those aren't going to be national awards, and if they are, people probably haven't heard of them. So say what the award is, who is eligible, how they give it out, all that. Because if not, it kind of doesn't mean a lot. So you want them to know how much it means. And then this is what APIC recommends. These are their kind of topics that you could have on your CV. I don't have all these, and a lot of them I kind of just condensed to clinical training, clinical experience. Do what you think fits your site. And if you don't have a ton of supervision experience, put it under clinical. That's what I did. I wouldn't have had a whole section for supervision when I've done it twice. A few years down the road, probably, but not at that point. Other than that, it's just I'm sure that you all have really nice looking CVs already. It's just make them as polished and detailed as you can without being too wordy.
Would you include? I was told to include the actual assessments that we've been trained to use. Would you include that?
I've been thinking about that lately, and I probably would at this point, especially like applying for positions where they want to know I've given them MPI, they want to know which child settings I'm familiar with. So I don't think that hurts to include it all.
Okay.
I wasn't going to a particularly assessment-heavy site, so at that point when I made this CV, I wasn't too worried about it. And they had my assessment count. But I think if you're going to somewhere that is assessment heavy or that's going to be a big chunk of your job, then I would definitely include it. And definitely later, I think I would include it because they won't have the API where they count how many wastes you've given. So even if you don't do it on this one, I think doing it later is too hard. Yeah, that's something that just came up for me where I thought, they're not going to know. Like the CVs are really important at that point because they don't know who you are. Any other questions about anything we talked about?
That's the other question. I know I've counted my hours and for so much I keep going back to it. So we count those reports we wrote in class that were with people we knew. Like, do those count, or just like with clients?
I don't know. I would check with faculty on that because I don't know exactly how they're wanting you to count. And I know I hope counting is getting more of a big deal here. Because it's a huge deal, so so those of you, especially earlier, keep really close track, especially of race and age and disability and sexual orientation.
It's hard to go back.
It's very hard to go back, and that's the situation that most of us have been in. That's really hard. And assessment gets really kind of fuzzy because you're like, how many hours did I do? So even assessments that you do.
When you find out the answer from someone, will you email that around?
Yeah. I was thinking that I heard that I still check it out, but I was thinking I heard that those count because they're still considered integrated assessment that you wrote, it would just maybe giving it. I mean, even when you gave it, at least we were supposed to have done it like it was a real person. So I think you can definitely count it, but double check.
That's what we've heard.
Doesn't Dr. Wright want to meet with us next month about counting those hours?
Yeah.
Good. That would be a good person to check with.
We're all
for
getting
sure.
together to
He's
do that.
okay. Good. Yeah.
I
Actually, I mean, Dr.
guess.
Johnson, so we always went to, but I know he's on sabbatical, so that gets, I don't know who the next. But Dr. Wright would be.
And he just went through the process not too incredibly long
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah. So, yeah, he's a great resource. He's here to help. Yeah, hours stink. And Time to Track is a program. I don't even know if you've heard of it, but everyone at my internship site used Time to Track, and I was like the only one who didn't. And they kind of continue to use it on internship. It's just a place, and it's matched with the API, I think, because it asks for gender, sexual orientation, all that stuff, and so you'll log it. It's like $30 a year or something. You know, it's not a ton a year. I think it's time and then the number 2 and then track. But that is a really great way to do this as you go along and not after the fact. And it seems pretty standard to a lot of other programs to use that Time to Track, so you might pass that around the earlier cohorts, especially first, second year, so that you don't have to go back and do the counting thing, because that is just a lot of time that you don't need to take necessarily at a time when you're stressed out.
Earlier you mentioned like 1,000 to 2,000 hours. That's like not just direct service, that's overall hours.
That's
correct?
your kind of total clinical hours.
Oh, thank goodness.
I was
You guys,
like,
you'll
I'm like, I
get
got
there.
20
You'll
after.
have
like,
it.
well,
No, you'll totally
kind of
No,
stuff.
I know. But see, you actually had a lot more than 20 that you would put on the API, because you count note writing time, you count videotape watching time, you count group soup
Supervision.
time,
Yeah.
individual soup time. So that's something that in Time to Track you'll be tracking all that, because it's like, well, I could go back and count client hours. No, you're counting all the other hours.
Because we did at the end of
We
the
did track.
semester, because we weren't sure
Yeah.
what we're allowed to count or not.
Mhm.
So we did it as like our last day in prac.
And a lot of the sites, at least thus far that I've looked at, have asked for, like, they'll have like direct service hours, how many they want you to have, and a lot of them range from like 300, 400, 500, and there's a couple that have said 1,000 direct service hours. So it just depends too, I think, on like but like teaching, I think, is included in that maybe, and supervising, like being, because that's, you're actually giving direct service hours.
Supervision's when you'll get a lot of hours, a lot of hours.
Because you can count basically all of that.
everything
as
you
direct service.
do. Yeah,
So
I mean, I had
like class
hundreds
time?
of supervision hours.
Pretty much, because you
Pretty
sit
much.
behind the mirror
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
observe, and so all
You're
the
chatting
times
with people.
you're observing, once
Yeah.
you're in supervision of supervision and in that track, all of those hours suddenly become direct service.
And
because-
assessment.
Yeah, and assessment
Those are
has a
huge
lot of direct service too.
Yeah.
So it's more than just sitting with one person or family or
Yeah.
couple and doing
That's reassuring.
counseling.
Yeah.
No, that's really good to realize at the beginning too, because that's kind of the part that's hard to go back and figure out. You're like, I don't know how many hours I wrote notes in a certain track, but keep track, because I think I ended up shorting myself a lot of hours, and it was okay in this case, but you just don't want to be in that position. There's no reason. So Time to Track. I'm trying to remember if there's another one.
Dr. Wright sent, I don't know. if
He
you
just
got
has
it.
spreadsheets that he has.
Yeah, but those, as far as I know so far, correlate
Correlate.
to the
I'm
API.
sure he
And I
does.
mean, it has the sexual orientation
Yeah.
and gender and disability and
Yeah.
even like all the different assessments that you've used and given. And that so far I've been using and it works well.
Yeah.
But I
Just have a system.
correlated it quite yet.
Yeah, his did. He sent it out like right when we were applying or something, so we didn't really have time to use it. But it was
Right.
and it seemed to correlate. I'm sure he'll keep up with that.
Yeah. Do you guys have that?
Yeah, he sent it out too.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not to the
Yeah, so if you don't want to pay to have it saved online, just use that and make a bunch of copies and hide them everywhere. I don't lose them. What else? I didn't have volunteer activities on my CV. Unless you're volunteering a lot in the psychology realm, I don't really see how that's all too relevant. But you know, if that's a huge deal for you, a huge part of who you are, then go for it. Anything else?
Completely away from this, what's one thing that you really, really wish somebody had told you before you started this whole thing?
The application process.
The application process, or like going to the interviews or whatever, like one thing you wish you had known.
Practice interviewing.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, that was hands down the thing that I kind of stumbled into doing that I realized was hugely important. So that, yeah, I mean, that was the part where it was like, and then I get to internships, like, oh, our program has mock interviews that we do, and I think, God, that would be an amazing resource. Exactly. So that's what I'm thinking. And I mean, if y'all want to do those, we were involved in internship interviews, and so I've done a lot of interviews here, a couple of years worth here, and then also one internship. Most interns are kind of involved in the new intern interview process. So we could, my goal is to get together some alums and have us interview you, basically, in November or December, and just help you go through the questions that are really common, and and the most important thing for me, I mean, I interviewed in Dallas, was my first interview. I could have saved a lot of money, but without going to the other 1,000. But it was my best friend that was interviewing me. I was staying with her, and so we just sat down at our kitchen table, and she asked me the questions, and I was like, and I felt the anxiety, and I was able basically to habituate to it and not have to experience that surge in my first interview. And so that was the thing that I wish I had done and heard and been even more deliberate about. That I'd done it with kind of a stranger and really felt that pressure to perform and know what you're talking about.
So how did you know what some of those common questions were?
I asked people who had already been through interviews. So we actually have that stuff compiled between...
We have some too. In our internship manual, there's a bunch of previously asked questions, or questions you're most likely to get asked in that big packet that we got. I'm wondering if that's what...
I didn't use that, and I don't remember getting that. So I don't really think... Yeah, I don't know if we got that.
So where do you have them all compiled?
In my email somewhere. But it was Sarah Grease that I talked to, and so she lives here in Greeley, and if she's not too busy being a new mom, I bet that she would be willing to help out with that interview process, or at least I can compile some of those questions with her and see if they're any different from what you have. She's interviewed and worked at University Counseling Centers for quite a while. So
did she go to our program?
Yes.
We're working on her dissertation data, actually. Dr. Johnson.
Are you? She was wondering about that. She's like, oh, what they're doing about that. About her this weekend.
Sabbatical,
So her contact information, I gave you just a list of resources. I wanted to get people who have done different types of sites, because when it comes to VA, I think I'm a great resource, and I feel comfortable sharing a lot of knowledge with you, but not a lot of people apply to VA, or really want to be there. So if that's not what you're interested in, I can kind of give you some overviews of other stuff. But if you want to know more about either counseling centers, Sarah's been an intern and a postdoc at University Counseling Centers, and then Jessica Riedel is currently interning at a mental health agency in California. And they also have inpatient psych services, and they do child and family work. So she's a good resource for those kind of sites.
And those are usually the sites where you need a master's, right?
That's what I found, but she actually didn't finish her master's, and she's at one.
Yeah,
so
it's really variable on the site.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at community health and counseling centers, and probably a third of the community health I looked at, I just had to knock out right away, because they said you have to have a master's. But then the other 2/3 of them didn't, at least haven't indicated that so far. So.
Yeah, it's just something to make sure you look at. Don't get in a position where you forgot to look at that.
And you said by state too, it's what I'm curious.
I don't know. That's just one of my curiosities. Does it vary by state? I don't know if you noticed that.
I think so. Because I think all ones in Colorado I had to get rid of, but a lot in Philadelphia, I think, didn't mind as much, or Pennsylvania. So.
Yeah, and I imagine it's just a state thing. But yeah, Colorado.
It's really just a shotgun approach at first, and then that's the easiest way to weed out some of the 40-something sites that you look at originally.
Yeah, there's
that and the 2,000-hour
questions in there, so master's completed or
dissertation
proposal
completed,
defended,
comps passed, and you just check those, and if you don't meet those criteria, you can say, that one's gone.
yeah, that's important stuff just to pay attention.